The first thing to understand is this. Pain is not always a sign of damage, but often a signal of imbalance. Lower back pain frequently emerges not because something is broken, but because the body has forgotten how to move with ease. When we slow down and stretch without equipment, without force, we are not fixing the body from the outside. We are reminding the nervous system that it is safe to release tension. Science shows that gentle movement reduces fear signals in the brain, and when fear quiets, muscles soften, blood flow improves, and healing begins in silence rather than struggle. The first thing to understand is this. Pain is not always a sign of damage, but often a signal of imbalance, a quiet message from the body asking to be heard rather than fought. Modern thinking has trained us in understanding of pain as an enemy, something to silence quickly, something to overpower with strength, tools, or urgency. Yet biology tells a more nuanced story. The nervous system is designed to protect us, not punish us, and pain is one of its primary languages. In the case of lower back pain, this language is frequently misunderstood. Research shows that many people with chronic lower back pain have no clear structural injury at all. Their bones are intact, their discs are stable, and their nerves are not damaged, yet pain persists. This paradox reveals something profound. The problem often lies not in broken tissue, but in a system that has become overly vigilant, responding to stress, poor movement patterns, prolonged sitting, and emotional tension by tightening and guarding itself. When we approach lower back pain through safe, equipment-free stretching, we are not trying to force change into body. We are creating conditions where the body feels safe enough to change on its own. The nervous system constantly scans the environment and the body for threats. When it senses danger, real or perceived, it increases muscle tone, restricts movement, and amplifies pain signals as a protective strategy. Aggressive exercises, heavy equipment, or sudden movements can unintentionally reinforce this sense of threat. Gentle stretching does the opposite. It sends a signal of safety. Slow movement, controlled breathing, and awareness reduce the brain's perception of danger, allowing protective tension to soften. This is not philosophy alone. It is supported by neuroscience. Studies in pain science demonstrate that calm, non-threatening movement can reduce central sensitization, a state where the nervous system becomes overly responsive and pain persists even in the absence of injury. Lower back pain often develops gradually, shaped by years of subtle habits rather than a single dramatic event. Sitting for long hours shortens muscles in the front of the hips and weakens deep stabilizers in the abdomen and spine. Stress elevates cortisol levels, which increases muscle tension and reduces tissue recovery. Poor sleep impairs the body's ability to regulate inflammation. Over time, these factors create imbalance, and imbalance leads to inefficiency. Muscles that should share the workload stop cooperating, and the lower back, designed for stability and controlled movement, begins to take on roles it was never meant to perform alone. Pain emerges not as a failure, but as feedback. The body is signaling that the system is no longer balanced. Safe stretching addresses this imbalance at its root by restoring communication within the body. Muscles are not isolated ropes that simply pull on bones. They are part of an integrated network guided by the brain. When movement is slow and intentional, sensory receptors within muscles and connective tissue send rich feedback to the nervous system. This feedback helps the brain update its internal map of the body, improving coordination and reducing unnecessary tension. In this way, stretching becomes less about lengthening muscles and more about educating the nervous system. Equipment is unnecessary because the most powerful stimulus is awareness combined with gentle movement. Gravity, body weight, and breath provide all the input required for this re-education process. There is also an emotional dimension to lower back pain that science increasingly recognizes. The lower back is deeply influenced by stress and emotional load. When we are anxious, overwhelmed, or constantly alert, the muscles of the back tighten reflexively. This tension is not a conscious choice. It is an ancient survival response. Safe stretching interrupts this cycle by slowing the body down enough for the nervous system to recognize that it is no longer under threat. As breathing deepens and movement becomes smoother, heart rate variability improves, a marker associated with better stress regulation and resilience. Pain begins to soften not because it has been conquered, but because the body no longer feels the need to defend itself. The idea of no risk is not about the absence of effort, It is about respecting the body's thresholds. Risk increases when movement ignores pain signals, pushes aggressively through stiffness, or relies on external resistance that overwhelms stabilizing structures. Safe stretching stays within a range where sensation is present but not alarming. This distinction matters. Pain that feels sharp, sudden, or threatening activates protective reflexes, while mild stretching sensation invites adaptation. Over time, these small, safe movements accumulate into meaningful change. Tissue becomes more hydrated, joints move more freely, and muscles learn to relax when they are no longer needed to guard. Scientific curiosity teaches us that healing is rarely dramatic. It unfolds quietly, often below conscious awareness. Collagen fibers in connective tissue realign slowly in response to consistent, gentle load. Blood flow improves incrementally, delivering oxygen and nutrients that support repair. Neural pathways that associate movement with danger gradually weaken, replaced by patterns that associate movement with ease. This process cannot be rushed. Equipment-free stretching honors the tempo of biology, which favors consistency over intensity and patience over force. There is also a subtle psychological shift that occurs when someone realizes they can influence their pain without external tools. Dependence on equipment can reinforce the belief that the body is fragile or incomplete, requiring constant external support. In contrast, safe stretching cultivates self-efficacy. Each gentle movement becomes evidence that the body is capable of adaptation. This belief itself has measurable effects. Research shows that confidence in movement reduces pain-related fear, and reduced fear leads to better outcomes. The mind and body are not separate systems. They are deeply intertwined, each shaping the other continuously. Lower back pain often teaches people to distrust their bodies. They move cautiously, anticipating pain, bracing before every motion. This constant anticipation keeps the nervous system on edge. Safe stretching offers a different narrative. It invites exploration rather than avoidance. Movements are slow enough to be observed, gentle enough to be trusted. Over time, the body learns that movement does not automatically equal harm. This learning is one of the most powerful forms of healing because it changes how the nervous system responds not just during stretching, but throughout daily life. From a biological perspective, the absence of equipment also means fewer variables. When movement relies only on the body, it is easier to maintain proper alignment and control. There is less temptation to push beyond natural limits. The spine, especially the lower back, thrives on subtle, controlled motion rather than heavy loading. Stabilizing muscles such as the deep abdominals and multifidus respond best to low intensity, precise activation. Safe stretching gently engages these muscles without overwhelming them, creating stability from within rather than imposing from outside. As stretching becomes a regular practice, something shifts beneath the surface. Pain no longer dominates attention. It becomes quieter, less demanding. This does not mean it disappears instantly or completely, but its meaning changes. Instead of a threat, it becomes information. The body becomes a partner rather than an adversary. This partnership is at the heart of long-term relief. Science supports this perspective. People who approach pain with curiosity rather than fear tend to recover more fully and maintain mobility longer. In this way, no equipment, no risk stretching is not merely a physical intervention. It is a reorientation of how we relate to our bodies. It respects the intelligence built into human biology, the capacity for self-regulation, adaptation, and healing. It acknowledges that pain is complex, influenced by posture, movement, stress, sleep, and belief. By moving gently and consistently, we address these layers simultaneously, allowing the system to rebalance itself over time, guided not by force, but by attention, patience, and an understanding that the body, when given safety and space, often knows exactly how to begin letting go of pain, how to soften its defenses, how to return to a state of balance that was never truly lost, only interrupted, waiting quietly beneath layers of tension and habit to be rediscovered through movement that listens rather than commands. When we stretch the lower back safely, we are not merely moving muscles. We are engaging in a quiet, biological dialogue with connective tissue, especially fascia, a living network that wraps, links, and communicates with nearly every structure in the body. For a long time, fascia was treated as passive packaging, something to be cut through or ignored. But modern science has revealed it to be richly innervated, highly sensitive, and deeply involved in movement, pain, and perception. Fascia is not rigid. It is adaptable, responsive, and profoundly influenced by how we move, how we breathe, and how much time we spend in stillness. Lower back pain often reflects not just muscle tightness, but a facial system that has become dehydrated, stiff, and less responsive due to repetitive postures and lack of gentle variation in movement. Fascia behaves differently from muscle. Muscles respond quickly to contraction and relaxation, while fascia responds slowly, adapting over time to sustained, gentle input. This is why aggressive stretching often fails to produce lasting relief and can even increase discomfort when force is applied too quickly. Fascia resists, triggering protective tension to the nervous system. Gentle, sustained stretching, on the other hand, allows facial layers to glide, rehydrate, and reorganize. This process does not require equipment because fascia responds more to duration and quality of movement than to external load. Gravity, body weight, and slow shifts in position provide exactly the kind of input fascia understands best. The lower back is particularly influenced by facial continuity. The fascia of the lower back connects to the hips, the abdomen, the hamstrings, and even the feet. Tension in one area can transmit through this network, creating discomfort far from its original source. This is why stretching the lower back gently can produce a sense of release that feels global rather than local. It is not magic. It is anatomy. When movement is slow and mindful, sensory receptors embedded in fascia send signals to the brain that recalibrate muscle tone throughout the system. The body begins to redistribute load more evenly, reducing strain on the lower back without the need for forceful correction. Hydration plays a crucial role in facial health. Fascia is largely composed of water bound within a collagen matrix. Prolonged immobility, stress, and shallow breathing reduce fluid exchange, making fascia stiffer and less elastic. Gentle stretching acts like a pump, encouraging fluid movement through facial layers. This hydration improves tissue resilience and reduces the friction that contributes to stiffness and pain. Importantly, this process takes time. Fascia does not change instantly. It responds gradually to consistent low-intensity movement. This is why no-risk stretching emphasizes patience. The goal is not to achieve maximum range of motion in a single session, but to invite incremental adaptation that accumulates quietly over days and weeks. Breath is an inseparable part of this conversation with fascia. The diaphragm is connected through facial chains to the lower back and pelvis. When breathing is shallow, these connections become restricted, increasing tension in the lumbar region. Slow, deep breathing during stretching changes the mechanical and neurological environment of the tissue. As the diaphragm moves fully, it gently mobilizes surrounding fascia and reduces sympathetic nervous system activity. This shift toward parasympathetic dominance promotes relaxation, improves circulation, and reduces pain sensitivity. The stretch becomes more than a physical act. It becomes a regulatory signal that tells the body it is safe to soften. From a scientific perspective, fascia is densely populated with mechanoreceptors that respond to stretch, pressure, and movement. These receptors influence muscle tone, coordination, and pain perception. When stretching is slow and controlled, these receptors send calming signals to the central nervous system, reducing reflexive guarding. Equipment-free stretching is ideal for this because it allows precise control over intensity. The individual can adjust the stretch moment by moment, staying within a range that feels informative rather than threatening. This responsiveness is difficult to achieve with external devices that impose fixed loads or positions. Lower back pain often persists because facial tissues adapt to chronic patterns of stress and immobility. Sitting for long periods causes fascia in the hips and lower back to shorten and thicken, reducing its ability to transmit force efficiently. When movement resumes, these tissues resist change, and the nervous system interprets this resistance as danger. Safe stretching gradually reverses this adaptation by introducing variability and gentle load. Over time, collagen fibers realign along lines of movement, restoring elasticity and improving force distribution. Pain diminishes not because tissue has been forced into compliance, but because it has been given time and safety to reorganize. There is also a temporal dimension to facial adaptation that aligns with reflective practice. Fascia responds best when stretches are held long enough for tissue creep to occur, a slow deformation under sustained load. This process requires stillness and attention, qualities that are increasingly rare in modern life. In this sense, safe stretching becomes an antidote to constant acceleration. It invites the individual to slow down and inhabit their body, to notice subtle sensations rather than chase intensity. This attentiveness enhances interoception, the brain's awareness of internal bodily states, which is associated with better pain regulation and emotional resilience. The absence of equipment reinforces this inward focus. Without external distractions, the individual becomes more attuned to how movement feels rather than how it looks or how much resistance is involved. This shift is significant. When attention moves inward, the brain integrates sensory input more effectively, refining motor control and reducing unnecessary muscle activation. The lower back benefits from this refinement because it thrives on coordinated, efficient movement rather than brute strength. Safe stretching restores this coordination by reestablishing clear communication between fascia, muscles, and the nervous system. Modern pain science recognizes that chronic pain often involves altered sensory processing rather than ongoing tissue damage. Fascia, with its rich sensory innervation, plays a central role in this process. When facial tissues are stiff and dehydrated, they send distorted signals to the brain, contributing to heightened pain perception. Gentle stretching normalizes these signals by improving tissue quality and sensory input. Over time, the brain updates its expectations about movement, reducing pain amplification. This is a learning process, not a mechanical fix, and it unfolds most effectively in an environment of low threat and high awareness. There's a quiet humility in working with fascia rather than trying to dominate it. It reminds us that the body is not a machine to be adjusted, but a living system that responds to care, consistency, and respect for its rhythms. Equipment-free stretching embodies this humility. It acknowledges that more force is not always better, and that healing often occurs in the margins of attention rather than in dramatic interventions. The lower back, often burdened by both physical and emotional load, responds especially well to this approach because it is deeply integrated into the body's postural and stress response systems. As the practice continues, subtle changes accumulate. Movements that once felt restricted become smoother. Posture adjusts without conscious effort. The lower back begins to share its workload with surrounding regions, reducing localized strain. These changes are not imposed. They emerge organically as the facial network regains its adaptability. Pain becomes less central, less insistent. The body feels more unified, less fragmented. This unity reflects the true nature of fascia as a connective system, one that thrives on gentle, consistent dialogue rather than forceful correction. In this way, safe stretching becomes an exploration rather than a prescription. Each session offers new information about how the body responds, where tension lingers, and how breath influences movement. This curiosity aligns with scientific inquiry itself, an openness to observation without premature judgment. By engaging fascia patiently and respectfully, we tap into a form of intelligence that predates modern medicine, an intelligence encoded in the tissues themselves, guiding adaptation through sensation and time, reminding us that the path to relief often lies not in doing more, but in listening more closely to quiet responses of the body as it gradually remembers how to move with ease. There is something quietly transformative about using no equipment when addressing lower back pain, because it strips health down to its most honest elements and challenges the assumption that the body needs external tools to heal. From a scientific standpoint, removing equipment reduces variables and risk, allowing movement to remain within natural joint ranges that the nervous system recognizes as safe. The spine, especially the lower back, evolved to manage body weight, gravity, and subtle shift in posture, not constant external resistance. When equipment is introduced too early or used aggressively, it can override the body's protective feedback systems. Without equipment, movement becomes self-limiting. Sensation guides intensity, and the nervous system remains engaged rather than defensive. Lower back pain often persists because people lose trust in their own movement. They brace, hesitate, and over-control, fearing that a wrong motion will cause harm. Equipment can unintentionally reinforce this fear by creating dependence and by magnifying consequences of error. In contrast, body-based stretching invites exploration. Movements are small, slow, and adjustable in real time. This adaptability matters because the nervous system learns through experience. Each safe repetition teaches the brain that movement can occur without danger. Over time, this learning reduces pain-related fear, a key factor in chronic back pain. Science consistently shows that fear of movement, not tissue damage, is one of the strongest predictors of ongoing pain. Using no equipment also encourages an internal focus that modern health culture often neglects. When there are no tools to manage or adjust, attention naturally shifts inward toward sensation, breath, and alignment. This inward attention improves proprioception, the body's ability to sense position and movement. Better proprioception leads to more efficient motor control, reducing unnecessary muscle tension and uneven load distribution in the lower back. The body begins to move as a coordinated whole rather than a collection of isolated parts. This coordination is protective, distributing forces across joints and tissues instead of concentrating them in vulnerable areas. From a biomechanical perspective, body weight stretching respects the spine's role as a stabilizer rather than a prime mover. The lower back is designed to transmit force between the upper and lower body, not to generate large ranges of motion under load. Equipment-free stretching allows the stabilizing role to reassert itself. Movements emphasize gentle mobility in surrounding areas like the hips and thoracic spine, which reduces compensatory strain on the lumbar region. As mobility improves elsewhere, the lower back no longer needs to move excessively to achieve everyday tasks. Pain diminishes because the system becomes more efficient, not because the back has been forced into greater flexibility. There is also a psychological freedom in knowing that health is not confined to a gym or a specific environment. Equipment-free stretching can be practiced anywhere at any time, reducing barriers to consistency. Consistency is one of the most critical factors in tissue adaptation and nervous system recalibration. Short, regular sessions of gentle movement are more effective than occasional intense workouts. This principle is well supported by research in motor learning and rehabilitation. The nervous system adapts through repetition and familiarity, not through sporadic overload. By removing equipment, the practice becomes accessible, sustainable, and easier to integrate into daily life. No equipment also means no external performance metrics. There are no weights to increase, no machines to adjust, no numbers to chase. This absence shifts motivation from achievement to awareness. The individual learns to measure progress through changes in sensation, ease of movement, and reduction in pain rather than through external benchmarks. This shift is not trivial. When progress is defined internally, it aligns more closely with the nervous system's language. The brain responds better to signals of comfort and control than to pressure and comparison. This alignment reduces stress and supports recovery. Risk is closely tied to unpredictability and overload. Equipment can introduce both, especially when used without precise guidance. Body-based stretching minimizes these risks by allowing continuous feedback and adjustment. If a movement feels uncomfortable, it can be modified instantly. The stretch can be reduced, slowed, or stopped without consequence. This responsiveness maintains a sense of control, which is crucial for pain modulation. Studies show that perceived control over movement significantly reduces pain intensity and improves outcomes in people with chronic back pain. No equipment, therefore, is not a limitation but a protective feature. The simplicity of equipment-free stretching also encourages humility and patience. It invites the practitioner to meet the body where it is rather than where they think it should be. This meeting point is where adaptation begins. When movement is gentle and honest, it reveals patterns of tension and compensation that might be masked by equipment. The body's habits become visible. One side may feel tighter, one movement more restricted. These observations are valuable data. They guide the practice organically, allowing the individual to respond to their own needs rather than follow a rigid program. Lower back pain often carries an emotional burden, a sense of frustration or betrayal by the body. Equipment can sometimes intensify this dynamic by framing the body as a problem to be fixed. In contrast, equipment-free stretching reframes the relationship. The body is no longer an object of correction, but a participant in dialogue. Each stretch is a question rather than command. How does this feel today? What changes when I breathe more slowly? Where does the movement stop naturally. This questioning fosters compassion and curiosity, emotional states that are known to reduce pain perception by calming the nervous system. From an evolutionary perspective, the human body evolved to move without machines. Our ancestors relied on walking, squatting, reaching, and resting on the ground. These movements maintain joint health and tissue adaptability through daily variation rather than structured exercise. Equipment-free stretching reconnects us with this heritage. It reintroduces movements that are familiar at a biological level, even if they feel foreign due to modern lifestyles. The nervous system recognizes these patterns as safe, reducing the need for protective tension. The absence of equipment also democratizes healing. It removes socioeconomic barriers and reduces dependence on specialized spaces or tools. This accessibility has profound implications for public health. When people believe they can care for their bodies with simple, safe movements, they are more likely to engage consistently. Consistent engagement leads to better outcomes, not only for lower back pain, but for overall mobility and well-being. This empowerment aligns with scientific evidence, showing that self-managed movement programs can be as effective as supervised interventions for many cases of chronic back pain. As the practice continues, subtle shifts occur in posture and movement habits throughout the day. Sitting becomes less rigid, standing more balanced. The lower back feels supported rather than strained. These changes reflect improved neuromuscular coordination and tissue adaptability. They are not the result of forcing alignment, but of allowing the body to rediscover efficient patterns. Equipment-free stretching supports this rediscovery by removing external constraints and letting the body self-organize. There is also a philosophical dimension to no-equipment practice that resonates with long-term health. It teaches restraint, respect for limits, and trust in gradual change. In a culture that often equates progress with intensity, this approach offers a different metric: sustainability. The body thrives on what can be repeated without harm. Safe stretching that requires no equipment can be practiced for years without burnout or injury. This longevity is perhaps its greatest strength. Ultimately, the choice to use no equipment is a choice to engage directly with the body's innate intelligence. It acknowledges that healing is not something imposed from the outside, but something facilitated from within. The lower back, sensitive to both physical load and emotional stress, responds especially well to this direct engagement. As trust in movement returns, fear recedes, and with it, much of the pain that once seemed persistent. What remains is a quieter body, more responsive, more coordinated, moving not on a command of tools or numbers, but guided by sensation, awareness, and the simple, profound capacity of the human system to adapt when given space, patience, and the freedom to move without fear. Lower back pain is, in many ways, a reflection of how modern life has reshaped the human body, not through trauma, but through prolonged stillness. The spine evolved in a world where movement was constant and varied, where walking, bending, squatting, and resting in multiple positions were woven naturally into daily survival. Today, long hours of sitting have quietly altered this relationship. When the body remains still for extended periods, certain muscles shorten while others weaken, and the nervous system adapts to this limited range of experience. Hip flexors tighten from being held in a flex position. Deep stabilizing muscles in the abdomen and spine lose their subtle endurance, and the brain gradually forgets how to distribute effort efficiently. The lower back, caught in the middle of this imbalance, becomes a place where tension accumulates and pain emerges as a signal that something fundamental has shifted. From a scientific perspective, the body is remarkably adaptable, but adaptation is neutral. It responds to what we do most often, not to what is ideal. Sitting teaches the body to be good at sitting. Muscles and connective tissues remodel themselves around this posture, shortening where movement is absent and losing strength where load is no longer required. Over time, when the body is asked to stand, walk, or lift, it relies on whatever structures are most available. The lower back often takes on excess work because it remains mobile while surrounding regions, particularly the hips and upper spine, become restricted. Pain is not a punishment in this scenario. It is feedback indicating that the system is working harder than it should. Safe stretching becomes a form of re-education rather than correction. It reminds the nervous system of movement options that have been neglected. When we gently stretch areas around the lower back, especially the hips and the muscles along the spine. We are restoring balance to a system that has become overly specialized in stillness. This process is subtle because the nervous system resists sudden change. Abrupt or aggressive movement can trigger protective responses, reinforcing the very patterns we're trying to undo. Gentle, repetitive stretching works differently. It introduces novelty without threat, allowing the brain to update its internal model of the body gradually. Coordination is at the heart of this process. The spine does not function in isolation. It relies on precise timing between muscles that stabilize and muscles that move. Prolonged sitting disrupts this timing. Stabilizing muscles may become underactive, while larger, more superficial muscles compensate by tightening. This imbalance increases compressive forces on the lower back and reduces movement efficiency. Safe stretching improves coordination by reawakening sensory feedback pathways. As tissues move slowly through comfortable ranges, sensory receptors send clearer information to the brain about position and tension. The brain uses this information to fine-tune muscle activation, reducing unnecessary effort and redistributing load more evenly. There is also a neurological dimension to modern stillness that is often overlooked. When movement is limited, the brain's representation of the body becomes less detailed. Areas that are not used frequently receive less sensory input, and their corresponding neural maps shrink. This phenomenon, known in neuroscience as cortical smudging, is associated with chronic pain. The lower back can become an area where sensation is vague or distorted, making movement feel uncertain or threatening. Safe stretching sharpens these maps. By moving attentively and within safe ranges, we provide the brain with rich sensory data. Over time, this clarity reduces uncertainty, and with it, pain. Stretching safely also counters the psychological effects of stillness. Sitting for long periods is often associated with mental stress, sustained attention, and reduced physical expression. Stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, increasing muscle tone and reducing tissue recovery. The lower back, sensitive to both physical load and emotional state, reflects this tension. Gentle stretching shifts the nervous system toward a parasympathetic state, characterized by relaxation and restoration. Breathing slows, heart rate variability improves, and muscles begin to release. This physiological shift is not incidental. It is central to pain reduction. Pain thrives in environments of vigilance and threat and softens when the body feels safe. Modern stillness also affects circulation. Prolonged sitting reduces blood flow to muscles and connective tissues in the hips and lower back, limiting oxygen delivery and waste removal. This contributes to stiffness and discomfort. Safe stretching acts as a circulatory stimulus, gently compressing and releasing tissues to encourage blood and lymphatic flow. Improved circulation supports tissue health and reduces inflammatory byproducts that can sensitize nerves. This effect accumulates gradually, reinforcing the importance of consistency over intensity. Another often missed aspect of stillness is its effect on breathing mechanics. Sitting posture commonly restricts diaphragmatic movement, leading to shallow breathing. The diaphragm is functionally connected to the lower back through both muscular and facial chains. When its movement is limited, tension increases in the lumbar region. Safe stretching that integrates slow, deep breathing restores this connection. As the diaphragm moves more freely, it reduces pressure in the abdominal cavity and decreases strain on the lower back. This interplay between breath and movement highlights how interconnected the system truly is. From an evolutionary viewpoint, the body expects variation. It thrives on frequent changes in position and load. Modern life, however, offers long stretches of uniform posture punctuated by brief bouts of activity. This mismatch creates stress. Safe stretching reintroduces variation in a controlled way. It fills the gaps between periods of stillness with gentle movement, reminding tissues and the nervous system of their full range of function. Over time, this variation reduces the shock of transitioning from sitting to standing or from rest activity, moments when lower back pain often flares. Safe stretching also addresses the misconception that pain must be fought with strength alone. While strength is important, especially in supporting the spine, it must be built on a foundation of mobility and coordination. Stretching restores these foundations. It creates space for muscles to contract efficiently and for joints to move without friction. Without this preparation, strengthening exercises can reinforce compensation patterns, increasing strain on the lower back. Gentle stretching prepares the system by reducing excess tension and improving movement quality. There's a reflective dimension to this process that extends beyond biomechanics. Modern stillness often mirrors mental patterns of rigidity and over-control. Safe stretching introduces softness and adaptability, qualities that resonate both physically and psychologically. As movement becomes smoother and less guarded, there is often a parallel sense of ease in thought and emotion. This is not coincidence. The nervous system does not separate physical and mental states. It regulates them together. By addressing stillness in the body, we indirectly address stillness in the mind. Over time, the cumulative effect of safe stretching becomes evident in daily life. Movements feel less effortful. The lower back no longer dominates attention. Transitions between positions become smoother. These changes reflect a system that has regained balance, not through force, but through gentle reminders of how it was designed to move. The body begins to distribute work more evenly, relying on hips, legs, and core musculature in harmony, rather than overloading a single region. Lower back pain, in this context, is not an isolated problem, but a symptom of a broader lifestyle pattern. Safe stretching does not simply target the site of pain. It addresses the conditions that allowed pain to develop. By counteracting modern stillness with regular, gentle movement, we restore a dialogue between tissues, nerves, and the brain that had grown quiet. This dialogue is essential for resilience. It allows the body to adapt continuously rather than locking into rigid patterns. Ultimately, safe stretching offers a way to coexist with the realities of modern life without being defined by them. It acknowledges that stillness is sometimes unavoidable, but suffering does not have to be. Through consistent mindful movement, the body learns to recover from periods of inactivity and to maintain balance even within imperfect conditions. The lower back, once strained by imbalance and neglect, becomes integrated again into a system that moves with greater intelligence and ease, responding not with pain, but with adaptability, grounded in the quiet biological truth that the human body remains capable of renewal when movement is reintroduced with patience, awareness, and respect for the rhythms that still govern beneath the surface of modern life. Perhaps the most overlooked effect of safe stretching is how it quietly reshapes a person's sense of identity and relationship with their own body. Lower back pain has a way of shrinking confidence. It teaches hesitation, caution, and self-doubt. Everyday movements become negotiations, each bend or turn preceded by an internal question about whether pain will appear. Over time, this anticipation can be more disabling than the pain itself. Safe stretching begins to reverse this process not by promising instant relief, but by offering repeated experiences of success. Each time the body moves gently without triggering pain, the nervous system records evidence that movement is not inherently dangerous, and this evidence accumulates slowly, altering perception from the inside out. From a scientific perspective, this shift is deeply neurological. The brain constructs our sense of capability based on prediction. When pain has been present, the brain predicts threat even before movement begins, increasing muscle tension and amplifying sensation. Safe stretching disrupts this predictive loop. Because the movements are slow, controlled, and intentionally non-threatening, they provide new data that contradicts the brain's expectation of harm. Over time, prediction errors occur. The brain expects pain, but pain does not arrive. With repetition, these errors force an update. The nervous system becomes less reactive, muscle guarding decreases, and movement feels more natural. This process is learning in its purest biological form. There's a profound sense of dignity that emerges when someone realizes they can influence their pain without external tools or constant supervision. Equipment-free stretching reinforces the idea that the body is not fragile or broken, but adaptive and responsive. This belief is not merely psychological. It has measurable physiological consequences. Confidence in movement reduces stress hormones, improves immune function, and enhances recovery. When a person believes their body can cope, it often does. The lower back, sensitive to both mechanical load and emotional state, responds particularly strongly to this renewed trust. Safe stretching also fosters patience, a quality that modern health culture often overlooks. Pain invites urgency. It creates pressure to fix, eliminate, or overcome as quickly as possible. Stretching gently without equipment resists this impulse. It encourages a slower pace, one that aligns with how biological tissues actually change. Connective tissue remodels over weeks and months, not minutes. Neural patterns shift through repetition, not force. By engaging in safe stretching, individuals learn to value consistency over intensity, a lesson that extends beyond physical health into broader patterns of self-care. There is compassion embedded in this approach. Instead of judging the body for its limitations, safe stretching meets those limitations with curiosity. A tight area is not treated as a failure, but as information. Sensation becomes a guide rather than an obstacle. This compassionate stance reduces internal conflict, which in turn lowers physiological stress. The nervous system responds to kindness as much as it responds to mechanics. When movement is approached with respect rather than aggression, the body often reciprocates with greater ease. From a biological standpoint, this compassion manifests as improved regulation. Gentle stretching activates sensory pathways that influence autonomic balance, shifting the body away from chronic fight or flight states. As regulation improves, inflammation markers tend to decrease, sleep quality improves, and tissue repair processes become more efficient. These changes do not announce themselves dramatically, but they are foundational. They create an internal environment where healing is more likely to occur, even in the presence of ongoing stressors. Identity also shapes behavior. When someone sees themselves as fragile, they avoid movement, reinforcing weakness and stiffness. When they begin to see themselves as capable, even cautiously capable, their behavior changes. They move more often, vary their positions, and engage with their environment more fully. These small behavioral shifts compound over time. Increased movement improves circulation, maintains joint health, and supports metabolic function. The lower back benefits not from isolated interventions, but from this overall increase in healthy variability. Safe stretching encourages ownership of the healing process. Rather than outsourcing responsibility to devices, programs, or experts, individuals become active participants. This ownership enhances adherence. People are more likely to continue practices that feel empowering and accessible. The simplicity of stretching without equipment removes excuses and reduces friction. It can be done on the floor, in a chair, or beside a bed. This accessibility reinforces the idea that care does not have to be elaborate to be effective. There's also a subtle recalibration of expectations that occurs. Instead of seeking a pain-free state as a permanent endpoint, individuals learn to work with fluctuations. Some days feel easier, others more restricted. Safe stretching accommodates this variability. Movements can be adjusted to match the body state without abandoning the practice altogether. This flexibility prevents a cycle of overexertion followed by setback that often characterizes more aggressive approaches. From a philosophical angle, this approach challenges a narrative that progress must always be visible and measurable. The changes brought about by safe stretching are often internal before they are external. Confidence returns quietly. Fear recedes gradually. Movement becomes less dramatic and more efficient. These shifts may not be immediately apparent to others, but they profoundly alter lived experience. The lower back becomes less of a focal point, less of a constant concern, allowing attention to expand outward again. Scientific research increasingly supports the idea that long-term pain outcomes are strongly influenced by belief systems and coping strategies. Safe stretching aligns with this evidence by cultivating resilience rather than dependence. It teaches that discomfort can be explored safely, that limits can be respected without being feared. This mindset reduces catastrophizing, a cognitive pattern associated with increased pain and disability. As catastrophizing decreases, so does the intensity of pain perception. There is also an ethical dimension to empowering people with simple, safe tools for self-care. It democratizes health knowledge and reduces reliance on interventions that may be costly or inaccessible. When individuals understand that gentle movement can influence pain, they are less likely to feel helpless. This sense of agency has ripple effects, improving mental health and overall quality of life. Over time, the practice of safe stretching becomes less about addressing a specific symptom and more about maintaining a relationship with the body. It becomes a daily check-in, a moment of listening. This regular attention prevents small imbalances from accumulating into larger problems. The lower back, once a site of recurring pain, becomes part of a system that is monitored and cared for proactively rather than reactively. In this way, safe stretching restores not just function, but a sense of wholeness. The body is no longer something that betrays or limits, but something that communicates. Pain, when it appears, is understood as a signal rather than a verdict. Movement becomes a form of dialogue rather than confrontation. This shift is subtle, but it is transformative, reshaping how individuals inhabit their bodies and navigate the world, grounded in the understanding that health is not the absence of sensation, but the ability to respond to sensation with awareness, confidence, and an ongoing willingness to engage gently with the body's capacity for adaptation and change.